If you want to build an aesthetic physique, then you're going to have to stop overeating and resetting your progress. I remember when I used to diet perfectly for days, but then seemingly at random, I would completely lose control and binge, wake up the next day feeling bloated and disgusted, knowing that I'd basically have to start over again. Nowadays, I don't have that issue, and I've managed to build an extremely attractive physique because of a few simple changes that I made. So in this video, I want to show you the exact adjustments that you can make to stop overeating and start building that attractive physique. So let me quickly go over the things that didn't work when trying to stop overeating. The first thing is more restriction. So trying to limit your calories even more the next day after you've gone over your calories. If you cut your calories really low the next day after a binge, you've basically gone from a massive surplus of food to a massive lack of food, and your body just doesn't want to deal with that. So it makes you more hungry, makes it more likely that you're going to overeat again. It's kind of backwards, but that's really the way that it works. The next thing is punishment cardio. So trying to burn off the calories that you've overeaten. This is very unrealistic for starters. For example, you can eat a donut, which is 300 calories in 30 seconds if you're me, or you can do an hour on the treadmill to burn those same 300 calories. You can see that there's a massive mismatch with how easy it is to eat calories versus how hard it is to burn them. So ideally you want to not overeat in the first place, but of course we'll talk about how to stop doing that. But yeah, cardio just to burn calories specifically is not really worth it. You need sustainable cardio that you do naturally. For example, walking is the number one that I'm going to recommend, but just trying to eat as many calories as possible and then match that through exercise is something that is probably gonna backfire massively. Another thing is completely eliminating a macronutrient. So for example, some people will go extremely low fat, or some people will go extremely low carb. Both these things are not optimal whatsoever when trying to build an attractive physique. Carbohydrates are necessary for optimal performance in the gym, and fat is necessary for optimal hormonal function. So if you completely eliminate any of these things, then you're gonna have less than ideal results with your physique. And also you're gonna create some type of psychological deprivation where people who completely eliminate a specific macronutrient, they'll always overeat their calories on the other macronutrient that they've allowed themselves to eat. The last thing is regular cheat meals that aren't tracked. So for example, you go out once a week to eat pizza and you completely forget that calories exist because it's just one day, right? It doesn't matter if you don't stick to the plan for one day. And that's half true, but what you don't realize is that you can eat back an entire week's worth of deficit in one day. In one meal, actually, you can do that, and I've done that several times. So if you're gonna have cheat meals, I wouldn't recommend, but if you're doing it for a social event or whatever, you still need to make sure that you're tracking the calories and you know what you're eating, you know what you're putting on the body to stay solid to the plan. Now let me go over some actual solutions to overeating. The first thing is going to be a sustainable calorie deficit. You want a calorie deficit where it feels like you're perhaps not even dieting, but you are consistently losing that body fat. An aggressive deficit would be something like 1,000 calories, and I'd only recommend that for someone who's at a very high body fat percentage, like 20% plus. A more moderate one is like 500 calories. I tend to stay around there. And a slow deficit, if you want to take it nice and simple, is like 200 to 300 calories. Now, all of this is going to be subjective to you. So you're going to have to choose a calorie deficit where, like I said, it's sustainable. You feel like it's manageable for a long time. You don't worry, like you don't think about, oh, when's this diet going to end? If that's what you're thinking, then the calorie deficit is probably too high. Ironically, choosing a more manageable calorie deficit is going to lead to you getting leaner faster, because most people who choose an extreme calorie deficit, like plus 1,000 calories, can only stick to that for 2 days, if that, and then they'll never get lean that way, obviously. So if you choose a calorie deficit where you can see yourself doing it for forever, obviously not forever, but in theory, right, then you're going to be able to stick to that for the long term, and you're going to lose that weight consistently. And as a bonus, if you choose a more moderate calorie deficit, then it's going to be easier for you to stay lean once you get to your goal body fat percentage, and it's also going to be easier for you to build muscle whilst you're losing body fat. The next thing is making your food satiating. When you finish a meal, you want it to feel like it's hit the spot. You don't want to be hungry. You don't want to have cravings after you finish your meals, because then obviously you're going to go and eat more calories. So the best way that you can do this, for starters, is just having protein with every single meal. You shouldn't be eating snacks or, just random foods that don't contain any protein, because you're going to be hungry very fast after those foods. For example, if you eat some crackers I wouldn't recommend eating that shit anyways. But if you eat, basically, even if you eat like some dates, for example, which is a healthy fruit, right? But if you're in a calorie deficit and you want to minimize hunger as much as possible, having a dry fruit that's high in sugar, very easy to overeat, that contains no protein, is not going to be the most conducive to stay in that calorie deficit easy. Every meal that you eat should contain a good amount of protein, basically, and it should also contain a moderate amount of fat. Now, the only exception to this is when you're eating right before your training session in the gym. Fat slows the digestion, so you don't want to have a full stomach before you train for obvious reasons. But after your session, or if you're not training that day, then that's useful. If you eat some fat with your meal, you're going to slow the digestion, which means you're going to be fuller for longer. That's why my main protein sources are things like beef and eggs and fatty fish, because they have the fat in there to extend the fullness. I'll have chicken breast or white fish or 0% Greek yogurt only if I'm eating before the gym. If I'm not eating long before I'm training, then that's when I'll utilize those types of protein sources. Now, another thing that you can do to basically make your meals as satiating as possible is add loads of high water fruits or vegetables to your meals. So maybe zucchini, bell pepper, cucumbers, or if you're having fruits, then oranges and melons and berries. Those are the types of fruits and veg that have higher volume for lower calories, which is important in a calorie deficit. So for that reason, of course, we're going to stay away from the junk food, the hyperpalatable stuff that has low volume for higher calories. So for example, cookies and Oreos and donuts and ice cream, all the types of hyperpalatable ultra processed food, not just for the negative health effects, but mainly in this scenario for making it easier to manage the calorie deficit. Because if you eat hyperpalatable junk food that has been designed to be as tasty and to be overconsumed as much as possible for profit reasons or whatever, then you're going to find it a lot harder to stick to that calorie deficit, and it's going to be more likely that you overeat. So stay away from all those junk foods and eat only whole, unprocessed foods. The third thing that you can do is to fix your mindset. And what I mean by this is that some people have a type of mentality where it's all or nothing. If they're not absolutely perfect for the entire week, every single day, every single meal, then that week is written off and it just might as well go in the bin and they'll just start again next week. So they might have stuck to their calories for 3 days, 4 days, maybe it gets to Friday and they have one meal where they go slightly off plan, they go slightly over their calories, and that's it, fuck it, write off the entire week or the entire weekend, in fact, which leads to them overeating their calories massively and actually writing off the entire week in terms of a deficit. So what you have to understand is that at the start, you're not going to be perfect. It's impossible. I was not perfect at the start. I would overeat my calories probably every few days. But if I did what most people do, which is think, okay, I've overeaten my calories today on Wednesday, so until next Monday, I'm just gonna overeat, then I never would have gotten lean because I would have done that every single week for eternity. So you have to realize that one off-plan meal doesn't have to spiral into an off-plan day, which will spiral into an off-plan week. You can just continue with what you're doing as if that little hiccup never happened. And maybe you don't lose a whole pound that week, maybe you lose 0.8 pounds, but that's obviously better than nothing. It's better than not losing anything and never getting lean in the first place. If you want to take it further and be even more optimal and basically guarantee that you get lean, then you can do this, and this is what I did. You can find out or just basically decipher what made you overeat, what made you go off plan with your meal or with your deficit in a day, and then you basically just fix that, you eliminate it. So for example, I realized that when I would look in the shelves where my little sister had tasty cereal or something, then I would end up grabbing handfuls of that cereal and overeating my calories. So I stopped looking in those shelves and I basically found it a lot easier to control myself when I was living with family, right? So if you find out the triggers that make you overeat and then you fix them slowly, there's going to be a lot of them at the start, but if you fix them one by one, there's a lot of more examples that I could go into, then eventually you're going to have nothing in your way. You're going to have nothing that makes you overeat and you're going to find it so easy to get lean. And the massive benefit of doing that is that every time you overeat in your calories and you figure out the trigger behind it, you don't think of overeating your calories as a mistake, as something that's really bad. You just give yourself an opportunity to learn. You give yourself an opportunity to make it more likely that you're going to get lean, even though what you did in the short term was not conducive to getting lean. But you know that, okay, now I can actually eliminate what made that happen in the first place, which means that in the future, it's going to be even easier for me to get lean. So you've basically done yourself a favor by overeating. That's the way that you can think of it, and it's going to make it basically impossible for you not to get to that body fat percentage that you want. The next thing that you can do to stop overeating is effective stress management. So a lot of people use food as a coping mechanism for stress and for emotions in general. Now, this cannot be the case if you want to be lean and attractive. You need to, like, food can only be a source of nutrition. It can only be something that leads you closer towards your goals. You cannot be using it to cover up other things that are happening in your life. You need to manage your stress, manage your emotions through other methods. The number one thing that you can actually do to manage your stress and regulate your emotions is actually sleep. People don't realize how big of an impact this has, because when you don't sleep, or when you have poor sleep like most people do, then your serotonin and other hormones in the brain that manage your emotions get dysregulated. So you, like, I feel this with myself because I have perfect sleep most of the time. So on a night where I don't have good sleep, the next day, I'm not joking, the next day I will actively feel more depressed, and not to the point where I'm going to do something crazy, right? Whoa, but to the point where it's like, I notice like, oh, I have more negative thoughts, which is weird. I don't really have that usually. So having good sleep is essential to stick into your deficit, because a lot of people don't get good sleep regularly, and then they feel like, okay, I need something that makes me feel happy. I get the dopamine from the junk food. Let's eat loads of junk food, and obviously you're not going to stick to your calories like that. So good sleep, get 8 to 10 hours per night. Stop going on devices an hour before bed, have a hot shower before bed, read a book, all of these things, right? Honestly, after a good night's sleep, every one of your problems just seem like less of a problem. Now, in terms of managing your stress specifically, the best thing that I'd recommend for you is to engage in a sport, a competitive sport, and do it regularly. For example, I do jiu-jitsu, which is obviously a combat sport, high intensity. I used to play football, or soccer, high intensity again. And these sports, these competitive sports where you're competing against other men and you have to be better to win, these are going to upregulate your testosterone, that masculine drive, and lead to you feeling more competent in unrelated areas of life, which is going to reduce your stress. Lifting weights also has similar effects in terms of endorphins and all the mental benefits, but to build an aesthetic physique, that's a given. You're going to be doing that anyways. So for extra stress management, emotional regulation, and also as a bonus, you're going to be burning a lot of calories doing sports. That's going to be something that I'd highly recommend. The next thing that you can do to stop overeating is designing your environment to stay lean. Your environment is one of the strongest predictors of the results that you're going to achieve. So if you want to get lean and be aesthetic, then your physical space needs to be conducive to that. Best thing that you can do here is not to buy any foods at all that are not part of the plan to reach your goal. Because if you don't buy them, then they won't end up in your house. And if they don't end up in your house, then they won't end up in your mouth. So if you plan to eat beef and eggs and fruit and fish, then what the fuck are Doritos doing in your shopping cart? Get them out of there. And in fact, to do one better, don't even look at them. Don't even go in the aisles where the junk food is. Honestly, like, I'm being completely real with you right now. I actually can't remember the last time that I saw a package of Doritos, because I've not been in the aisle of the grocery store for a long time. So maybe they've changed the design of the package. I wouldn't even know. Basically, don't even tempt yourself by buying the foods that are going to take you off track. And to not buy the foods that take you off track, don't even look at the foods that are going to take you off track. In the supermarket, right, I'm only going around the perimeter of the store, because that's where the meat is, that's where the fish is, that's where the fruits are, that's where the vegetables are. Maybe every once in a while I have to go near the center to get some rice or something, but it's going to be a lot easier to restrict yourself from buying the junk food in the first place than it is to not eat it when you've already got it. And as an extra layer of protection, something that you can do is go to the store after you've already eaten, so you don't get tempted, because when you're hungry, it's going to be a lot harder to resist all the tasty stuff that you can get. So go to the shop quickly before you get hungry again. Like, I used to come back from jiu-jitsu or from the gym, and I'd go to the store, and like 5 times out of 10, I'd end up with an extra cinnamon roll by accident that I didn't mean to have, but I just ended up with it because I was starving. Now, if you implement the steps that I've given you in this video, you're going to find it a lot easier to stop overeating and start building that lean aesthetic physique. If you want to build an attractive physique, then check the top link in the description for one-to-one coaching. If you're not ready for that just yet, then check the second link to join my community instead. Thanks for watching. Ask any questions you've got in the comments. Links in the description if you want to build an attractive physique.